This morning we're going to take a look at faith in class, and a little bit of background on this. About 2 months ago, the elders in Pierre got together, and this was kind of prompted by a discussion that we had coming into 2012, really a budget discussion that we had coming into 2012, and after listening to the reaction and the feedback that we got from the congregation, one thing that we thought we wanted to cover in 2012 was faith. I think we've become so reliant upon ourselves that we have discounted the idea of faith. And so, beginning in February, we started a discussion on faith. Our preacher has been doing lessons on faith, and one of the elders during the regular assembly has been getting up and talking about faith, and it just so happens that that's been me. So what I want to do this morning is to give you a little bit of a recap of some of the stuff that we've talked about in Pierre, and some of the stuff that has really challenged me personally. I grew up in the church. I think my first day at church, I was probably, I may have been 5 days old. I've been going to church for about 30 years now. And this was not something that we spent a lot of time on. And so there's been this, to me, it's been kind of a personal challenge of what do I need to learn about faith. So I want to share some things that we've come across, and hopefully I can work this contraption here. So let's talk about faith. And there we go. I want to give you two definitions. The first one is faithfulness. Typically when we think about faith, this is one of the first things that comes to mind. It's an adherence to a certain set of standards. When we talk about what is your faith, a lot of times what the response that we'll get is a doctrinal response. I believe this. I have faith in this doctrine. And when we talk about being faithful to our spouse or even faithful to our God, we talk about having this relationship and this connection. And I think we feel very comfortable with that. One of the challenges is that all there is to faith? When you look at some of the biblical definitions of faith, it goes beyond this. It's more than just a doctrine. It is a connection. And so when I started approaching this, the idea of faith, this is the definition that I wanted to use. It's not a belief that God can do anything, because our faith teaches that. We know that God can do anything. What I wanted to focus on was this idea of it is a confidence that God will do something specifically, and then the conviction to pursue it. Do we believe that God works in our world? Do we believe that God is active, alive, cares, and that He can do things in our world? And folks, let me tell you, to me this is a challenge. The first one, that's simple. The idea of faithfulness to me is simple. I can quote doctrine with my eyes closed. To me, the challenge was, do I really believe that God is active, alive, and working? Do I really believe that if there is something that I want or that I need, that I can approach God and with the confidence be able to say, here's what I want, take me there? As I thought about this, I broke it down a little bit further to me. And I broke it down, first of all, into this idea of an accepting faith. To me, this accepting faith is a belief that God is going to take care of you. Most of us who grew up in the church, and most of us who have a Christian background, Believe that God is going to provide for us. He's going to take care of us. In fact, that's one of the uh, the foundational principles of Christianity. It is a belief that God is going to be there with us. And one of our favorite passages comes from the book of Romans. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God and those who are called according to His purpose. We love this passage because we know that in the end, something positive is going to happen. God's going to take care of us in one way or another. And how many times have you seen people who are faced with the challenges in their lives, they quote this passage, or if there is someone that is going through struggles, we use this generic passage and we say, you know what, you can believe that God's going to work you through it. And that's a good thing to know. But I believe that even this is passive. I've come to believe that there is something that is even more. And when I was looking for a concept, I came up with this one. And it's not just an accepting faith, but a directing faith. To me, this idea of a directing faith is a belief that God is going to take me to a particular place in my life. Let me see if I can put it in two terms, maybe that for those of us who are vision people, we can see the difference. An accepting faith to me, this one back here, is kind of like living in the light. We know that God works in our world. We know that God is going to take care of us. We know that God is there because we walk in the light. There is this light that's there. But to me, this directing faith is like a laser. It is gathering all of the light, multiplying it, focusing it in on something, and making a difference. If you've ever watched the power of the laser, it has a lot of the same qualities as light. It's just focused, and focused on a purpose. And when we look at faith in our lives, I really have to believe that that's what it could be. Is there a place for this generic faith, this accepting faith? We know that God's going to take care of us. Yes, I believe that there is a place for that. But how much more could we do? How much better could our lives be if we directed that faith? If we harnessed that energy and applied it towards a goal, applied it towards something that we really wanted, or an answer that we were really looking for. Now, when we talk about faith, I don't want us to think about it as being Christmas. You know, God, I want you to do this. I want you to give me this present here. The New Testament teaches us that sometimes we don't get because we ask with the wrong motives. You know, we're taught that God is just not this great big Santa Claus. Whatever we want, that He's going to grant us. He's not some big sugar daddy that lives in on a throne somewhere. But I do believe that if we have the right intent, and if we have an honest and an open heart, and we are looking to better ourselves or better our congregations or better our world, that we can do better than what we've done in the past. We need to have an accepting faith, and that's what gets us through some of those difficult times. But something that is even greater is the faith. It focuses us in on something. So, in theory, and to me this makes sense. May not make sense to anybody else, but it makes sense to me. So that prompted me to ask the next question. All right, how do I get this directed faith, or this directing faith? It sounds cool. How do I get it? I want to take a look at 5 different things that we need to do to have this directing faith. The first thing is we need to discover or rediscover the power of God. let me ask you this question. How big is your God? How powerful is your God? If you were to ask the average person, do they believe in God? I would think that a majority of this country, and I would say an overwhelming majority of this country would say they believe in God. They believe in some deity that exists at some place. But if you ask them to describe what this God does, or how almighty this God is, I think they would struggle with that. And folks, I wonder if those in our fellowship would struggle with this sometime. Do we really believe in an all-powerful, in an all-interested, I know that's not the right word, but in a God who really cares, who wants to be a part of our lives? Again, the accepting faith part tells us that we know that there's a God out there, and we know that in some way He is wanting to make things right. He's going to work things out for us. And maybe that time is after this life is over. Do we really believe that God is active, alive, and working in our world? How big is our God? Is our God bigger than that problem that we have in our lives? Is our God bigger than, more powerful than, that person that stands between us and what we feel is our mission or our ministry in life? Is this God bigger than a political figure or a political party or a king or whatever else that might stand between us and changing the world? How big is our God? Again, from an intellectual level, I think we believe that He is the God of the universe. But from a practical, day-to-day, hands-on perspective, do we believe that He is great, wonderful, and using that phrase, almighty? When you think about it, that's an interesting phrase, an interesting word. It sounds really good, Almighty God. What does that mean? What does it mean to be an almighty God? If you struggle with this, I want you to walk outside tonight, and I want you to look if you can see the stars tonight. I think tonight's going to be okay. Tuesday is not so good. I want you to walk outside tonight and look up in the sky. And you guys, those of you who live in the country, which is everybody here, even in Pierre, the megalopolis of Pierre, we do have light pollution. But get outside of town and look up in the stars. And I want you to think about God as being the being who spun all of this into existence from nothingness. I want you to think about how small we are in compared to how great God is. He created our very being out of nothing. He created this beautiful world, this magnificent world in which we live, which is such a small, minute part of this universe in which we live. And He did it by going like that. That is how powerful God is. And when we think about His ability to overcome any circumstance, His ability to overcome any issue, His ability to overcome any problem that we have, all of a sudden it becomes manageable. We know He is almighty. We sing songs, we read the Psalms. But do we really believe that? The first thing in having a directing faith, a faith that will lead us to do great things in God's kingdom, is to discover how great God can be. Because the answer to our prayers is not found in ourselves. It's in Him. Just how big is our God? That's the first thing. The second thing, we need to find the focus. There are going to be times in our lives when we're going to pray, God, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. I just need something. And I know that you made the promise that you're going to take care of me. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know how you're going to take care of me, and I don't know what I don't know. And there's sometimes when that's as good as it gets. But how much better would our lives be? How much more powerful would our churches be if we actually sat down and said, you know what? In my own limited wisdom, here is where I think I want to go. Here is what I see as my purpose in life. Here is what I see as a focus for the rest of my life. Have we ever really sat down and said, this is the direction I want to go? It is so easy to feel like that Cheerio in the sink. You know, that last Cheerio when you empty out your bowl of cereal in the morning and it gets caught in that vortex as it goes down into the drain? How often do we feel that that's what our lives are like? We are just sucked into the vortex of the world that keeps spinning around in our world. We really have no control. We have no focus. We have no direction. What would happen if we found a focus in our lives? Here's where I want to go. And here is what has become important to me. When you look at some of the great characters of the Bible, what made them great was they had a focus. They knew where they wanted to be. You think King David woke up one day and just said, you know what, I don't know where God wants to put me. You know, it might be cool if I could be king someday. Here I am sitting out here as being a shepherd somewhere, or being a soldier. You think David had a focus? From the time that he felt this calling until the time that he assumed the throne, he knew where he was going. He may not have known what this turn was going to take him or where he was going to go with this issue, but he knew he had a focus that eventually he would sit on the throne in Jerusalem and that he would oversee a nation and bring them back to God. The Apostle Paul, great illustration of someone who was focused. He realized that his calling in life was to go out and to be the apostle to the Gentiles. His goal was to go out there and to preach the gospel to as many people as he could, to set up as many churches as he could. That was his focus, and that was the direction. And whenever he looked at his life, and whenever he prayed for direction, that had to have been what it was. What does God have in store for your life? Is it to be the best mom that you can be? Then be that. Pray that God will give you the opportunity to do that. Or maybe it is to be a missionary, to go someplace from here and to teach and to preach. Is that where you feel called? Is that the direction that you think you ought to go? Again, in our fellowship, there's some words that we don't like to use. And one of them is this idea of being called to something. We don't like that. That sounds denominational. How focused would our lives be if that's what we did? If we felt this calling, And then we prayed, we sought God's direction. Focus. Again, think about the laser, the direction that God is going to take us. Cancel the can'ts. All right. You know what? I can do number one okay. I know I'm coming to a better understanding of God. And really, I can dream. I'm pretty good at having a vision. I can find a focus. This is one that beats me just about every time. What I mean by this is, have you ever said, you know what would be great? If I could do this. Wouldn't that be neat if I could do this? And then all of a sudden, start explaining reasons why I can't. Well, that'll never work. Can't do that. That's not going to happen. How many times do we defeat ourselves before we even try? Well, I can't do this. Have you ever been on a sports team that had this mentality? They get it, imagine a basketball team right before they go out and play a big game and they've already decided they're going to lose. What's going to happen? Not only are they going to lose, they're going to lose bad. Do we find ourselves doing the same thing? Rather than telling ourselves why we can't, let's reset back to number one. How powerful is our God? Well, I can't be a missionary. I can't spend a month in Nicaragua helping out poor people. Why not? Well, because of this, and because of this, and because of this, and because of this. Will a person who has that mindset ever do it? The answer is no. I'll never be able to make a change in my life. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to be able to do this or to accomplish this goal? We already tell ourselves why we can't. Or as a church, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could be the full-time missionary supporter for this particular group or this particular person? And pretty soon we begin to tell why we can't. Well, we're just small. You know what? Cattle prices, they're okay now, but what about the next big drop? All right, we got to take care of, we're going to have $5 a gallon gas by next week. I'm just going up to Dickinson and filling up, by the way. Just go right up there and fill up. Anyway, we got to cancel the cans. Do we really believe that God can? The fourth thing, when it comes to being a person that is full of faith, is to pray with passion. Pray with passion. How's your prayer life? We grow up learning the right things to say. Like I said, I grew up in the church. I have prayed publicly probably ever since I was about this big. I can say the right thing. How's your prayer life? Do we really feel a connection with God? Do we really believe the power that is in prayer? Do we really believe that God cares? I want to look at a couple of passages. The first one comes from Matthew chapter 21, verse 22. If you remember the story, Jesus has just cursed a tree, and the apostles walk by it the next day and go, "Wow, that tree's dead." I don't think they said it exactly that way, but Wharton translation. And Jesus teaches them about the power of prayer when he says this: "All things you ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive." We have spent a lot of time justifying this statement. Well, Jesus really didn't mean that. He was just talking to the apostles, right? Well, if you ask for the right things at the right time in the right way, well, maybe, but you don't want to get too confident because God will smack you down. Do we really believe in the power of prayer? Turn over to Matthew chapter 7. Several of you know Bob Duncan. Bob is one of the elders in Pierre. And those of us in Pierre, we've started carrying these little bitty Bibles here because it's a lot easier. But his take is it's not his phone that it has his Bible on it. It's his Bible that he can make phone calls with, and I like that. So, but you look at Matthew chapter 7. Look at beginning in verse 7. All right, there we go. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Or what man is there among you who when his son asks for a loaf will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, he'll not give him a snake, will he? If then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give what is good to those who ask him? We spend a lot of time talking about seeking, and you will find, and knocking, and it's going to be open. But do we really believe with the same vigor that if we ask, it'll be granted? Do we believe in the power of prayer? One other one. Just real quick. Turn over to Luke chapter 18. One of my favorite parables, because it's one I need to hear quite a bit. Luke chapter 18, beginning of verse 1, it says, Now he was telling them a parable to show that at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart, saying, In a certain city there was a judge who did not fear God and who did not respect man. There was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him, saying, Give me legal protection from my opponent. For a while he was unwilling, but afterward he said to himself, Even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow comes to me, I will give her legal protection. Otherwise, by continually coming, she will wear me out. And the Lord said, Hear what the righteous judge said. Now will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day in and day out? And will he delay long over them? Jesus uses the illustration of a woman who comes every day in front of a judge and says, I want you to grant me this order. 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 And finally, this unrighteous judge who does not know right, who doesn't care about righteousness, finally says, Okay, I've had enough. You got it. Jesus says, God cares. God cares about you and your direction and how you think you ought to be living your life. You come before Him in prayer, He's going to listen. Talked about this not too long ago, and I had somebody say, well, but you know that sometimes God's answer to prayer is no. Yep, I understand that. And you know what? I don't think we need to teach that much more, because we already believe that. Most of us are already convinced that God's answer is no. What we need to be teaching is keep trying. Keep on keeping on. The fifth thing, got to see the signs. A friend of mine who is a DCI agent, he says you got to follow the signs. And whether you're working on a criminal case or really whether you are working in faith, you're looking to walk in faith, you got to see where God is leading you. If you pray, Lord, I want you to send me out here to do this, you need to start looking for the roadmaps of how to get there. If God is going to grant us what we need and what we want, He's going to start showing us the signs. This does two things. First of all, it provides direction. All right, God's on the same path, or God's showing me the path I need to be on. And I need to follow over here. But it also provides us encouragement that we're on the right path. If you ask for God to grant something, and He proves to you and He gives you a sign that He is working on this with you, what does it do? It's like saying sick 'em to a dog. The thing about faithful living is the more encouragement we get from God, the more faithful we're going to be. And the more we look at how God is leading our lives, the more focused we can live. Do we see that God is working in our lives? Do we acknowledge that? And do we build upon that? Finally, when we're talking about directed faith, we need to reconnect with people of faith. We need to reconnect with people filled with faith. There is nothing that'll suck your faith out of you more than anybody than somebody who doesn't believe. Mention, there are going to be a lot of people out there, when you start talking about living faith-filled lives, and they're going to say, well, you know what? God doesn't necessarily have to grant what you ask. And if you surround yourself with enough of those, you're going to be right there with them. As a church, are we surrounding ourselves with people who really believe that God cares, that God can do anything, and that we need to be on a mission? Are we surrounding ourselves with people who have that type of mindset? I would like to say that everybody in every church believes